My name is Lena Parker. I was 11 years old when my mother decided that Europe mattered more than I did. She stood in our driveway last summer, suitcase upright, sunglasses already on, and pressed a wrinkled $20 bill into my hand like it was a prize. "Congratulations," she said brightly. "You're independent now." Independent. That was her word, not mine. She bent down, kissed my forehead quickly, too quickly, and grabbed her suitcase again. "Don't bother calling. Just order food if you need it. You're old enough." I watched her stride to the taxi, the suitcase rolling behind her, and the door click shut. The sound echoed in my empty house. I stared at the $20. Not a plan. Not a babysitter. Not even a real goodbye. Just the cold tile floor under my bare feet and a silence that felt heavier than the money in my hand. "I'll be fine," I muttered to the empty hallway, forcing it to feel true. My hands were shaking anyway. I was alone. Completely alone. No one was going to cook, check in, or even notice I was here. I tried to turn it into a challenge. Day one, I told myself I would prove I could handle this. I lined up the few cans in the pantry, checked the fridge that was half empty, and shoved my fear down as far as I could. If my mom thought I was independent, then maybe she needed to see what that actually looked like. By day two, the $20 had already begun to shrink in my mind. The pantry offered nothing appealing. A couple of cans I couldn't even open without cutting myself, a cereal box that was mostly air, and a jar of pickles I hated. I ate carefully, rationing each bite, pretending I was a survivor in a story that would one day sound impressive. By day three, the joke was gone. My stomach growled so loudly it felt like it was echoing through the walls. I turned on the TV to drown out the creaks, opened my mom's laptop and stared at her work emails. Each one a reminder that her life continued while mine had paused, stranded on a few crumbs and a shaky $20. I grabbed my notebook and wrote a title in big letters. Evidence. Beneath it I scribbled. Left alone at 11. $20. No food plan. No check-ins. Writing it down shifted something inside me. If they thought I was mature enough to be alone, then I was mature enough to record everything. To make sure someone knew. To make sure someone would see. By day 5, hunger was fog. My hands shook. I found a half-empty cereal box and ate it dry from the bag, stretching each handful. Another line in the notebook. If I disappear, this proves it wasn't my fault. I realized survival wasn't enough anymore. This was about making them accountable. The emptiness of my home, the silence, the neglect, it had to be documented. On day 7, my body was weak, but my resolve was stronger than ever. I peeked out the window. Kids on bikes, dogs barking, parents walking with coffee cups. Normal lives. My street felt like another world. "You chose Europe over me," I whispered to the empty street. "Do you know what that's going to cost you when someone finds out?" And then the doorbell rang. I froze at the doorbell. No one ever rang our doorbell. Not really. Packages got dropped, kids just knocked. But this felt different. My heart pounded in my chest, fingers trembling as I walked to the door. I cracked it open just enough to see a man in a green jacket, the emblem of my school stitched on the chest. Recognition hit me slowly. "Lena?" he asked gently. It was Mr. Caldwell, the school counselor. He looked concerned but controlled. "I've been trying to reach your parents. Can I come in for a minute?" My first instinct screamed to lie. Pretend everything was fine. But something inside me said no. I stepped back. "I guess sure." He entered, scanning the room. The empty fruit bowl, dishes in the sink, the counters nearly bare. Each detail screamed neglect. I wanted to shrink into the corner, but I stayed rooted to the spot. "Are your parents at work?" he asked softly. "In Europe," I said flatly. "For a month." His eyebrows shot up. "A month? And who's staying with you?" "Just me," I admitted, my fingers curling tighter around my shirt. I watched his expression shift. Concern deepened into seriousness. He pulled out a chair and gestured for me to sit across from him. "How long have you been alone?" he asked. "A week," I whispered. "And do you have enough food?" "Money." I laughed bitterly. "A $20 bill and a credit card that doesn't work." He stared at me, counting the ways this was wrong. Finally, he leaned forward. "Lena, leaving an 11-year-old alone with almost no food, no supervision. This isn't just irresponsible. It's dangerous. It's neglect. Neglect. The word reverberated in my skull. Laws, investigations. A whole world I'd only seen in TV dramas suddenly landed in my kitchen. What happens if someone finds out? I asked, voice small. Child Protective Services, he said carefully. There could be an investigation. Your parents could face serious consequences. Consequences. My anger twisted into something sharper. Not fear, determination. I pictured my mother walking into the house and seeing strangers asking questions she couldn't charm away with fake smiles. Seeing the notebook, the empty pantry, the videos I had recorded. Do you want help? He asked quietly. Real help. Not just groceries. Something that made sure this never happened again. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to refuse, slam the door on it all, pretend it hadn't happened. Another part, the part that wrote evidence in big letters, knew pretending was over. Yes, I said finally. But what does that mean for them? It means adults will finally see what you've been through. They'll have to answer for their choices, he said. I looked down at my hands, then back at him. Then help me. I want them to see exactly what they did. I want them to feel what it's like to lose control. He nodded once firmly. First, we make sure you're safe. Then we make sure the right people hear your story. As he stepped into the hallway to make a call, leaving me with my notebook, a strange calm settled over me. Fear was still there, but underneath it was a quiet, steady determination. I was no longer just a kid waiting to be rescued. I was the witness. Minutes later, he returned. I called your neighbor, Mrs. Delgado, and also someone from the Child Protection Hotline. They're sending someone to check on you. But first, we get you something to eat. My cheeks burned. People would see what I'd been living through. But another part of me felt satisfaction. If they were checking on me, they were checking on my parents too. A knock sounded at the door, softer this time. Mrs. Delgado stepped inside. Her eyes scanned me, landing on the notebook, the empty cereal box, my pale face. Oh, Lena, she whispered. Why didn't you come to me sooner? I didn't want to look weak, I blurted. They always tell me I'm mature, that I can handle things. Asking for help feels like proving them wrong. Her expression softened. Asking for help isn't weakness. It's survival. And sometimes it's the only way to make adults face what they've done. I nodded slowly. Make adults face what they've done. That sentence hit harder than anything. We sat together. For the first time, I didn't feel small or invisible. I told them everything. The suitcase rolling out the front door, the $20, the dead card, the way my mom had laughed when I asked who would be staying with me. Mr. Caldwell took notes. Mrs. Delgado's jaw clenched at each detail, and I felt a spark of power I'd never felt before. My story mattered. The next morning, I woke to the smell of pancakes and syrup instead of the gnawing emptiness I'd grown used to. The warmth of Mrs. Delgado's kitchen felt surreal, almost like stepping into someone else's life by accident. But I didn't forget. I still had a plan. Breakfast was quiet at first. I poked at my plate, mind spinning with what was coming. Mr. Caldwell had explained the next steps. My parents were being called back early. They weren't returning because they cared, they were returning to protect themselves. That thought made my stomach twist. After breakfast, we gathered my notebooks, receipts, and video clips. Layer by layer, I had documented everything. The cereal boxes, the dead credit card, the empty pantry. Evidence that couldn't be argued away. By late afternoon, the call came. My parents' flight had been moved up. 3 days, not 3 weeks. My heart raced. Relief mixed with something darker. They were coming home, but not for me. I'll be with you the entire time, Mr. Caldwell said. And the caseworker will be here too. You don't have to do this alone. I nodded. Alone I might have cowered or hidden. But with them here, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Readiness. The day before they arrived, Mrs. Delgado and I staged a small setup at her house. The goal wasn't just my safety, it was preparation. Every document, every video, every scribbled note had a purpose. I had to make sure that when my parents walked through the door, the truth hit like a punch they couldn't ignore. When the night fell, I barely slept. My bag was packed, my notebook at my side, my phone recording everything quietly. I imagined their reactions, shock, disbelief, maybe even anger, but most of all, acknowledgement. This was the moment I had been waiting for. Morning arrived. The caseworker arrived first, followed by Mr. Caldwell. Mrs. Delgado held my hand as we walked toward the house. Every step felt heavy. Every breath reminded me. I wasn't just walking into my home. I was walking into a confrontation that had consequences for them. Finally, the front door opened. My parents stepped inside, looking tired from travel, smiling like they had no idea. That smile shattered when they saw us. The caseworker, Mr. Caldwell, Mrs. Delgado, and me standing in the middle, notebook and receipts in hand. "Lena," my mother said cautiously, What is all this?" I didn't flinch. I opened my notebook and handed it to the caseworker. She flipped through the pages, noting the videos and receipts. My father's eyes darted to the empty cereal boxes and the untouched food containers. His lips parted, but no words came out. "You left me," I said quietly but firmly. "Alone. Hungry. With nothing but a debt card and $20. You thought I could handle it. You thought I wouldn't notice. You were wrong." Silence filled the room. The weight of months, years, and that single summer pressed down on them. They hadn't anticipated this. Not the evidence. Not the witnesses. Not the official presence of a caseworker documenting everything. Mr. Caldwell stepped forward. "Your daughter has been alone for a week with no supervision. There is documentation. There is evidence. You will answer for your choices." My mother's face paled. My father's jaw tightened. I felt a quiet triumph. Not out of cruelty, but because finally someone was seeing what I had lived through. I handed the caseworker the videos on my phone. She nodded, understanding immediately. Each clip, each scribbled note added weight. This wasn't just a story of neglect. This was a record. A record that they couldn't erase. My mother opened her mouth, but Mrs. Delgado's voice cut through sharply. "This isn't about pride or reputation. This is about a child's safety. Your daughter isn't just asking to be seen. She's demanding it." The tension was electric. I watched as my parents processed, realizing that no charm, no excuses, no fake smile could undo what had been done. I stayed calm, breathing steadily. Every note, every video, every step I'd taken in these last weeks had led to this moment. This was my control. This was my voice. For the first time in my life, I felt truly heard. And as they stood there, stunned, I knew one thing. The consequences were real, and this time they were for them. The room felt heavy. My parents stood frozen, staring at the open notebook, the receipts, and the screen showing the video clips. Their faces flickered between shock, guilt, and confusion. It was the first time I'd seen them without their usual armor of dismissal and distraction. You left me?" I asked quietly, letting the words sink. Not angrily, not hysterically. Just plainly, like stating a fact that couldn't be denied. My father opened his mouth, then closed it again. My mother's eyes welled up, but there was no apology, just a flinch, a pause, the kind of hesitation that comes when someone realizes they've been caught. The caseworker stepped forward, calm and professional. "Your daughter has documented everything. There is evidence of neglect, and the school has been notified. You will need to answer for these choices." For the first time, I noticed the room shift. The air wasn't just tense, it was charged with authority. Not mine, not theirs, but a presence that couldn't be ignored. I felt a strange surge of power. I wasn't just 11 anymore. I was the witness, the one whose voice carried consequences. My mom finally whispered, almost as if to herself, "I thought she'd be fine." I shook my head. "You thought wrong." The next few hours were surreal. We went through every detail. The caseworker asked questions, documented timelines, and even asked me to recount my feelings, the fear, the hunger, the loneliness. I spoke carefully, each word deliberate, knowing this was no longer just my story. It was proof. Mr. Caldwell and Mrs. Delgado watched quietly, supporting me without stepping over. It felt like an orchestra where I was both conductor and soloist, controlling the tempo and intensity of the truth. "You will understand," the caseworker said, "that consequences aren't just about punishment. They're about accountability. Adults must face the reality of neglect, just as children face the reality of dependence." I nodded. I had known this in my heart, but hearing it aloud gave it weight. This was bigger than anger. This was clarity. My parents tried to speak, to interject, to explain themselves. My father stammered. We didn't mean we just. I held up my hand. Silence. For once they weren't in control. The notebook, the receipts, the video, these were my armor. My voice was my sword. By late afternoon, my parents were escorted into a separate room to discuss their situation with the caseworker. I stayed in the living room with Mr. Caldwell and Mrs. Delgado. My chest ached, but it was a different ache now. Not from hunger, not from fear, but from a sense of justice finally unfolding. I pulled out my notebook again and began writing. Evidence, notes, feelings, all layered together. Each word was a brick in the structure of truth I had built. This was more than survival, it was preparation. For what I didn't fully know. But I knew that when the time came, the truth would not be denied. That evening, I watched as my parents were informed that authorities were involved, and that their choices would have serious repercussions. Their expressions were unreadable. A mix of disbelief and panic. I felt no satisfaction in seeing them scared. Only a quiet recognition that accountability had arrived. Mrs. Delgado placed a hand on my shoulder. You've done everything right. You stayed strong, you documented, and you spoke up. That is all a child can do. I nodded, feeling the weight of the words. For the first time, I felt a kind of safety that wasn't just about food or a roof over my head. It was about the recognition of my reality, the acknowledgement that my life mattered. Later that night, I recorded a short clip on my phone. Not out of anger, but as a record of my resilience. Today, I whispered into the camera, is the day they finally saw me. Not just the empty house, not just the food they left behind, but me. I am 11, but I am not powerless. And this time they will remember it. I uploaded the clip privately, knowing it could be used in the investigation. Then I tucked my notebook under my arm and went to bed at Mrs. Delgado's, surrounded by warmth and quiet. The house smelled of home, not neglect. I knew tomorrow would bring more questions, more meetings, more explanations. But for now, I allowed myself a small private victory. I was seen. I was heard. And I had finally taken control of my story. As I drifted to sleep, a thought lingered. The consequences weren't just for them, they were for me too. Every action, every choice, every truth I had documented was now a shield. A shield that no vacation, no indifference could ever take away. Tomorrow the reckoning would continue. And I would be ready. The next morning I woke up feeling lighter. The heavy weight of silence, the gnawing fear, and the constant worry that had clung to me for days were finally fading. Mrs. Delgado had made breakfast. The smell of toast and scrambled eggs filling the air. Felt normal, safe, almost surreal. Later, the caseworker returned with updates. My parents were being summoned to meet with Child Protective Services and school officials. I would be there, my voice included. It wasn't revenge, it was justice. And this time I was prepared. Sitting at the table, I opened my notebook. Each page I had filled with details, dates, feelings, and evidence felt heavier than any backpack I'd ever carried. I realized that in my small hands, I held not just a story, but proof of my experience. My story. My reality. By the time my parents arrived, the house was calm yet charged. They froze as they saw me seated with the caseworker and school counselor, my notebook laid out in front of me. For the first time, I was in control of the room. They couldn't gaslight me, they couldn't ignore the truth. The meeting began. My parents tried their usual deflections, excuses, and forced smiles. But I calmly read from my notebook, explaining what happened day by day, showing the receipts, describing the hunger, the fear, the isolation. Every word was deliberate, every pause intentional. I watched their expressions. Shock, panic, a flicker of guilt. It was strange to feel satisfaction not in anger, but in the undeniable truth finally being recognized. I was not powerless. I was being seen. I was being heard. The authorities asked questions and I answered honestly. I explained how the empty pantry made me feel, how the $20 couldn't feed me for a month, how the non-working card had left me stranded. The room was silent after each explanation, the tension thick, the reality undeniable. By the end of the meeting, my parents were informed that neglect had been documented, and that measures would be put in place to ensure my safety in the future. They would have to attend parenting courses, check-ins would be mandatory, and my well-being would no longer be at risk. It wasn't just about punishment, it was about accountability. After the meeting, Mrs. Delgado and Mr. Caldwell guided me back to their living room. I felt a quiet triumph, A sense that the worst had passed and yet, that my voice had made a difference. I looked at my notebook, now heavier with evidence and resilience. Sitting there, I realized something important. Documenting my experience, speaking the truth, and asking for help had not only protected me, it had ensured that my parents would think twice about neglect. I wasn't just surviving, I was shaping my own story. I picked up my phone and recorded a final clip. "This is my story," I whispered, looking straight into the lens. I was 11, left alone, hungry, and unheard. But I spoke. I recorded. I documented. And now people know. Adults cannot ignore what they did. And neither should you. I saved the clip, knowing it could help someone else someday. Someone like me. Then I smiled faintly, realizing something else. The journey wasn't just about anger or consequences. It was about empowerment. I had taken control of a situation that had seemed hopeless. And now I knew my voice mattered. Before heading to bed, I scribbled one last note in my notebook. Even when powerless, truth gives strength. Speak, record, protect yourself. You are seen. You are heard. As the camera fades to black, I want you, the viewer, to think about this. What would you do if you were left unheard? How would you ensure your story mattered? Comment below with what kind of story you want to see next. True stories, suspense, survival, or revenge? Let us know. If you found this story gripping, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because the next story will be even more intense, more suspenseful, and even more revealing than this one. Remember, sometimes the smallest voice can create the biggest change. And this is just the beginning.